Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the October 21st Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are in the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Goury. The question period sign-up sheet for those of you in the audience who are interested, and I don't see a thunderous crowd here today. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question relating to a specific agenda item, would you please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet, and at the start of question period I will call up those who've signed up to the podium to address council. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Goury, I understand we don't have any.
There's no late items, Your Worship.
Motion for approval of the agenda is circulated. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour, motion carries. Thank you. Motion for adoption of the minutes. We have none to adopt. That makes it simple. Presentations. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship.
2020-2024 preliminary project plan continued.
Thank you. As we ran out of time at our Wednesday Finance and Audit Committee on the 16th, we are finishing up the presentation today. And we've saved the best for last, and Mr. Richard Harding is going to give us the presentation on the Parks, Recreation and Culture Department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. I have to warn you that the mayor is not whining, but he has an infection in both ears, and my ability to hear is quite limited, so if you yell today, I'll be quite thrilled. If you want to get rid of any aggressive feelings.
So louder the better?
The louder the better. Thank you.
Great. Your Worship, as per what Public Works and Engineering did, we just have some general, I don't even consider them highlights, just examples of what the calls for in the next 5 years particularly. A lot of our slides are some highlights of the next couple years. But as I go through it, there's only a few slides. Please stop and at me anytime, any questions, if that's okay, if you like. And again, this is definitely not an exhaustive list. It's just we try to pick a bit of a crossover of different projects throughout Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and also some facilities of which we also are still doing some of the budgeting for some of our city facilities. Mr. Art Groot is here to also answer any questions on some detailed components if you have anything on the work plan. But with that, I'll start ahead. I guess one of the themes I would say still for Council's consideration in our Parks, Recreation, Culture program, you're still going to see a theme of renewal of existing facilities and maybe enhancement of existing facilities. As we go through it, you're not going to see a lot of new facilities in general, but more of renewal of what we have in place. And that leads me to the first slide, which is where some of those newer aspects of what the community may want to see or council may want to prioritize is the update of the Parks, Recreation, Culture Plan Review. So that is underway now with the goal to get it back in council for final adoption as late as 2021, hopefully maybe sooner if we can. But that will provide direction for future facility development and upgrades. And we say facility, that's a facility that can be everything from a playground to a pool to an ice sheets or whatever it is the community is looking for. So we, again, from our 2005 plan is definitely at its end of its life and dated. Ideally, we would like to have updated it a few years before this. Majority of the broader objectives have been achieved. There's a couple in which we can talk about that have not been achieved and will need to be reviewed again as we go into the next one. But anyway, the plan will recommend park acquisition priorities also and management directives as well as service delivery options over the next 10 years. And we say that service delivery because the services do change. For example, we look at the 1994 one, pickleball I don't think was invented. You look at 2005, we may have talked about it. We start doing in 2020 or 2019, pickleball, we'll definitely hear a lot about pickleball, just as one example. Same as the dirt jump tracks and other activities that evolve and change of desire. And again, stop me anytime if you like. Another part of it is planning process will involve background research, including GIS analysis, best practices reviews. So we'll continue to look out what other communities throughout Canada, even North America, are doing on best practices providing parks, recreation, and cultural services. Demographic analysis also. These are ones we will be linking with the other planning processes underway, which we've talked to council about. The other one is community consultation process will be extensive with this, as well as Statistical random sampling, which we found in the 1994 plan specifically and 2005, of really randomly and statistically finding out what the community wants. You'll hear a lot from specific user groups of issues that they need, but we found over time when we do that general survey, it's interesting what we find that the general population wants. And so we'll be doing that through the analysis also. Any questions on the master plan update? I started with this because you'll see a lot of the, if council's talking to the community about where some of the newer things are coming from or going to be, it will be this process that will really, I think, streamline that and find out what it is the community wants to prioritize and council wants to prioritize going forward. A couple of examples then of some areas of enhancement. In 2020, we'll do design with replacement proposed for 2020. The Aquatic Center will be over 20 years old then. This water feature has been done extremely well at the Aquatic Center, and it's a fun upgrade and an exciting upgrade. The boat is, we keep it going for the next couple of years, but definitely it's at its end of life, and it's a chance for us to see, okay, what can we do with that very active leisure pool at the Aquatic Center to make it fresh and vibrant.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship.
Let's go for a swim.
Yes, absolutely. We see this a lot in some of the presentations, and it's end of life. And how do we come about to realizing that? Is the plastic decaying? What are some of the things that come into it? And if I hear that phrase, how long do I have before this is actually dangerous? I guess that's the question.
Right. We can go through the statistical, actual analysis of different consultants and engineers. Mr. Groot can mention some of those if we want to, but really we do, like for example, on this boat, we evaluate the uprights every year. We go in and actually test it, see how long they're going to last, and we'll paint them up a bit more. And then, based on the wear of those uprights, staff think it's we're keeping it going, but we really should start thinking about redesigning and adding new features. And that would be similar to roofs. We use different professions to analyze, and we have staff in-house that are able to do that, be it trails or surfaces, HVAC systems. We can do that in-house. A lot of times we'll do that analysis out. And we've got a slide actually coming up on that, which I'll get Mr. Groot to come up and talk a little bit more about how we're doing some of these facility assessments and condition assessments.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Just on some cultural, again, the Port Theatre, again, it seems it was just yesterday it was built, but now it's again, getting a little bit older, so we're starting to do some renewal in there. So 2023 is just reupholstering of the seats. And again, this is just an nice example of some things we're doing in the city facilities. And if you go through the more of the detailed reports what you have on the different areas, we can go into some of those other aspects that we're doing. So this one, initially our picture was just of the top right corner. It was just a picture of this electrical substation. It didn't really tell a story, but it is.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Harding, through your worship to Mr. Harding. I guess the question I have with regard to the Port Theatre is the seating. I probably, of all of us here, my wife and I probably frequently more than most. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I see the issue about wearing seating. And maybe it's just the seat I use. It's in perfect shape. But I kind of wonder about, unless other seats are having a lot of wear and tear, the ones we use, which is row O, number 22 and 23, just in case you're wondering.
So this is 2023, so still 3 years out. Yeah. And we'll continue to assess it. If it's one of these, here's an example where if we find in 2022 or even, in 2021, we look at it again and say, well, this is something we can push out again. And I'll show you some slides of projects where we have pushed things out. It's risky, but we'll put this, of course, not a lot of risk here, but if we see that we'll work with the management staff of the Port Theatre and they think, no, we can continue to get a few more years, then we'll look at that.
So it's not set in stone, it's just...
Not in stone, but we just wanted to show some examples of some things. And again, this is all renewal type of programs. We could have picked a bunch of different ones, so this is just one we picked with it. That's a good question in the sense of how we'll look, and then we'll continue to figure out if we can move out. But we also want to make sure they get in the plan. If not, then they're not under consideration. This one is actually, this is the Bevan Park Electrical Substation. That's the original substation of 1974-75, and it's definitely worked hard over the years. It's one where we're doing the design in 2020, project completion 2021, and again, we're still extending it, but this is the power for all of the original Bevan Park Recreation Complex. Same with another renewal is the Bevan Park roof. So this is for over the Cliff McNabb, or Frank Crane Arena, the original pool, the social center, and then a few years out, the extension to the, we did in, I think, 96 on the leisure pool. So it's the original Santa Fe from 1986. It's actually, apparently it's an example for the company, and the owner's going to come out and look at it again because we've actually extended the life of this longer than any other Santa Fe roof that they know of. Did I get the right pronunciation? Yeah. So again, it is a big price tag, and this is one that we keep testing the fabric, and we moved it out already a number of years. Every time we can think we can get a few more years out of it, we'll get a few more years out. Now we're looking, we stretched that as long as we can, so we've got it in for 2021 and 2022.
Councillor Gaspard has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I'm just curious, Star and Fill, that is a fabric?
Oh. Okay. Yes, yeah, membrane fabric.
Interesting.
Okay. This is our Facilities and Park Amenity Condition Assessment Program, 2019 and ongoing. We actually were successful in getting a grant, $500,000 grant to aid in our assessment of all of our facilities, including our parks. And this is to Councillor Bonner, through your worship, if any questions on, I can ask Mr. Groove to give a bit more detail on how we're doing this condition assessment and amenities program. But before he comes up, we'll say this work is, the work that's underway and the material we've got now, the information we'll get this next year will help with our Parks, Recreation, and Culture and Facilities Master Plan. Also, the material information in there will be part of that. So, Art, maybe if there's anything you want to add to that? And this is a number of facilities too, not just PRC facilities. Is there anything specific you like?
My main reason for asking the question is how can I, as a council, make the decision? I know we're going to get recommendations. I'm just going to know what are my leeway? You know, can we knock it back a year? That sort of things. Not anything specific. It was just the end of life. We have a lot of things seem to be end of life, and I want to say how much end of life is end of life. Mostly that's saying how do we get to that number?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner. So the intent with the condition assessment program is actually to be able to look at all assets within facilities like this, say, that are about $5,000 and above, and look at their current condition and what their expected life expectancy might be versus, you know, what they look like right now, and then looking at replacement plans for those assets, and then being able to spread that out over the facility, but also all of the other facilities that we own. And so if there's HVAC 1 or whatever there is here, maybe there's 20 more of those across the organization and what have you. So that's information that we don't have right now. So the idea is to be able to provide that big, wide picture so that decisions based on that can be made, and we can make decisions, risk-based decisions on the information that we get out of this process.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and is that part of that asset management software that we heard about earlier in this meeting?
So through your worship again to Councillor Bonner. So the intent is, one of the things that you need for that asset management program is a really good, complete data set. So what we don't have in our facilities is a really complete data set of what are all the assets, what condition are they in, how long are they going to last, and what do they cost, and what should we be doing formally to maintain them. So we do all those things kind of informally, but to be able to have an asset management program that'll perform properly, you have to have that formal data set. So the second part of this is to be able to complete that data set so that when, you know, council decides that that's a program that we adopt, we have the data set ready to go and feed it into the system rather than waiting till then.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Art's still up here, Your Worship. I think what the key part there is that risk assessment, and so we would come back on specifically if we come back to the roof, for example, we're taking a risk assessment to that. So the more we stretch it out, the more risk we have of a failure of the roof system. Same as with the power system. So we're taking a risk. At times, if something fails, it's a low risk, or if it fails, we can quickly repair it, or it's not going to be an issue. If this, for example, went down, we wouldn't have power to those facilities for quite some time because we just don't have a backup system for it. So
would I be wrong in simply saying, Mr. Harding, that this is the prudent approach to asset management that's gained the city its reputation that it has, and that it would ill behoove us to stray from that path? Fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And this will definitely help get us in the Parks Recreation side and our facility side up to where other parts of the department are at, or the city is at.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. And this risk assessment then, God forbid, if something was to happen, that the roof did collapse, we would be able to utilize that to show why we made these decisions, correct? Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the amenities? Okay, thanks, Art.
Thank you.
And there's a couple that are coming out, so pleased to know that the tender for this is out now, and Council's decision a couple months ago was to do Phase 1 and Phase 2 all in 2020. So the tender's out, the tender closes at the end of this month, and the schedule is to start early in the new year with opening before school's out in June. So it's an exciting project underway. This is one we added into here as one that wasn't in the 2020 plan. We brought this up earlier to Council this year, seeing it's one that we do need to move forward on some of the risk issues that mentioned Councillor Armstrong. So this is now in for 2020, which wasn't in previous years, although we've been working on the condition aspect of it. McPhail-Sutton Phase 1, this is, you'll start seeing work ideally at the very end of December, early in the new year. On this one, in conjunction with our next slide, which is the Rotary Park one. Again, I highlight this one is that it's a major partnership with the Child Development Society and making our first totally inclusive playground. And so we're very excited about that coming forward, as well as working with Rotary on theirs, which will be adjacent to it. So we'll project manage their project for them. This is actually, the Rotary is paying for all of this, but we're assisting them in the project management, the tendering of the project and such. Just added this one, and here is now, thanks to a sewer project that Public Works is doing, or engineering's doing, Morningside Drive. We now have sewer capabilities, will have sewer capabilities at Neck Point. So we put in for 2021, which is part of the approved old Neck Point master plan with sewer ever came up, was to put a building. It won't look exactly like this. It'll have a different design and an up-to-date design, but we just used that one as a kind of an example of a scale for it. And again, these aren't the highlight ones. They're just examples of what you'll see within the overall capital plan. Sroxham Lights, again, that project will be, the tender goes out at the end of this month with work happening in the new year, and ideally up and running by mid-ball season in the spring. And that's it, just a quick example of, as I mentioned, there's a number of new projects in there. I think, again, that will come up through the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan. One of the main ones that's on the old master plan that still isn't on the books, I know Council has heard about, is a new community center in the south end. It's not in this plan. That's one we'll have to continue to work with, as well as a number of other projects you may have heard of, groups and organizations working away on. This last week, of course, we had the Loudon Boathouse in front of you. It's not in the plan yet either. It's now will be up and for consideration for Council based on.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, sorry. Just as an example of the Loudon Boathouse that we talked about last week, it's now for Council's consideration, but up till this point, it wasn't in the plan. So,
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, through you to Mr. Harding. And in the expansion for the RCMP, is that included in the projects?
no.
No, thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding. Just a question regarding our urban canopy. where council is quite interested in expanding that. Does that fall under your department, or is it engineering?
Right now, it's both areas, but under community development or community planning, the urban forestry coordinator is there with with the strategy. It was with PRC years ago. Of course, most, if not majority, of lands or parks and natural areas that we manage, of course, we have to work closely and find ways to enhance the tree canopy and the tree issues. There are some projects in this capital plan to deal with tree assessment and tree work, as well as expanding some of our planting programs.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, yes.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding, thank you very much for the presentation. I would be interested in a further comment about this slide. Projects not included in the plan, in the 10-year plan looking ahead, and I know you've indicated that you've just given us some examples of projects. I've also heard that there's been projects on the books that have been pushed out further for various reasons, and that's fair enough. But it seems to me that there are a number of projects that haven't been mentioned that, looking out 10 years from now, should at least be on the books for consideration. And I've got a list of them in front of me if you'd like me to give you my opinions, but just a general comment about that. Should projects not be at least identified, and then if they're not priorities for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, or even 10, that's fine, push them out, but at least have them on the books.
Yes, Your Worship, Councillor Thorpe, we can go through some of those examples. Some of them, on the part of it, is either we're still into some further studies. For example, the phased approach to Roxman Stadium, that will come back to council. We're doing the first part, which is the lights.
I'll take that one off.
But so that will come back to you.
Mr. Harding, I do believe Councillor Thorpe, who spent a successful career in public education, may be marking you, so I warn you.
Oh, I like that. I could use a couple A's. I've never had any in school, so it'd be nice
I had to give the mayor a gold star the other day. He begged me for one.
So there's a number of ones. We're working closely, for example, with minor soccer, now United Soccer. That's on a motion a previous council had for us to work with them, come back with some phased improvements to which they've got some funds to go towards. That we will also bring back to council on that. As you know, we've approved a number of leases, VIX lease, the search and rescue lease. Those aren't on here, but of course those are buildings in there. You'll hear more and more about the public market. That's not in our farmers market. That's not in here. I have actually quite a long list, but I think it's, well, again, I mentioned it in the very first slide, is hopefully we'll flesh out a lot of those during the Parks, Recreation and Culture planning process, and we'll identify all those in that new document and then prioritize those moving forward.
Thank you very much. I think that would be useful for council, at least to see them as part of the long-term master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Thorpe has, I think, reflected the view of many around the table that there's a number of projects we'd all like to think and see, and the obvious ones, the south end around a community centre, equivalent to Oliver Woods. Mr. Rudolph and I had a discussion earlier today in which he wisely suggested perhaps there's some opportunities for working in conjunction with the school district and other bodies that where we might have an opportunity to save tax dollars and also create projects that were useful and important for the community. We realize it's a big, long list, and we're also conscious of the fact that we have to create the political atmosphere that will enable us to pay for this. So appreciate your comments today. Any further questions for Mr. Harding? Ms. Mercer?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that wraps up our presentation of the project plan for 2020 to 2024. So just to wrap up a few things. So many months, and in some cases years, of staff time has gone into putting this plan together. And so funding and timing and staffing resources are all considered when we put the plan together. And so the plan that this plan that we presented with you today will be what we present to you on the 25th of November, and will be included in the financial plan bylaw that we bring to you for adoption in early January. So unless council has any changes. So at this point, we ask that the committee can ask further questions or make any motions to have things changed in the plan. And we rather have those done now because changes can take a bit of time to do. So we would rather have them now so we can have a presentation to you on the 25th that represents your wishes.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Brown, Hemmons, and Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, I'm just curious, and unfortunately I grabbed my wrong gray notebooks. I don't have the timelines right in front of me, but alternative access into the Chase River Cinnabar area was, I believe, pushed out a little further. And I'm just curious if the planning can be accelerated and options be explored, not necessarily the project itself, just so we have some information around the exact routing. And I'm just, I think all of us that have been in that area, and listening to the speakers list, I'm sure that actually one of the individuals after me was probably thinking the same question is, it is quite a problem. So just, and I know staff are aware of it, I'm just wondering what is the likelihood we could advance at least the planning around what alleviating that problem might look like.
Through your worship to Councillor Brown. Yes, the Cranberry Connector, the project itself, we pushed that out in the plan because it has substantial financial implications. But in terms of studying the area and the sort of the transportation mobility options that we have, we're embarking on that right now. Actually, we have some funding available, and we're going to be conducting a fairly thorough study of what the best transportation improvement options are there. I mean, the Cranberry Connector was conceived more than 20 years ago. It met the needs of the day, but the question is it even sufficient right now? Is it the best project for the dollars? Like all those questions, we need to make peace with that before we can actually start detailed design of whatever we do there. So that's one of the reasons why we pushed the project out, just because we weren't quite convinced it was the best project at this time. So yeah, we are starting the study of the area essentially very soon.
Sorry, when you touched yourself, you moved yourself to the bottom. Try it again.
Thank you very much.
Hit your... Oh, we're going to have to sacrifice everyone. You'll all have to put yourself back on the
Thank you very much,
Sorry.
Your Worship.
Thank you.
Just in quick follow-up then, if once the planning and analysis is sort of done and it's identified that there might be a different project, would then that come before council again for consideration of the timeline?
To your worship, Councillor Brown. Yeah, so once this study is complete that would look at all the various options and the sort of the timing and stuff like that, we would essentially reset the timing and the budget and the project and so on. So that would be sort of in the next budgetary cycle likely. We would hope that we would have some better information. So at that point, it would be the project and the timing could have changed. So
And when is the estimated completion of the study?
2020.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the spreadsheet that was attached to the presentation we just had, and I'm wondering if I can ask specific questions about that. Fairly specific questions, just for my own learning. One of them is we have an urban forestry management strategy that seems to have a significant reduction in funds allotted to it over the next 4 years. I'm curious why that goes down so sharply. And please let me know if these are too specific.
I don't have the answer to that, but give us a couple minutes and we
Okay.
might be able to.
While you're looking, I also have a couple of others. So there's some programs that have proven themselves quite useful in the community that don't seem to be funded past 2020. And I'm curious if that's because strategically we haven't chosen them in future years and that's something we need to put on the books. I'm thinking the shower program and the urban cleanup program, none of those are funded past 2020. As well as the appliance rebate program and the toilet rebate program, like these kind of things that the community has expressed a need for.
Through your
Like a
worship, yeah.
lot.
Through your worship to Councillor Hemmons. So with the shower program, I believe that was there was limited. There was an end date on that funding.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, certainly council could bring that back up, but there was an end date on that one. With the, was it the toilet rebate?
Well, less so that, more the urban cleanup.
Urban cleanup.
Like I'm thinking, you know, around if we're doing downtown revitalization, if we have nothing funded for graffiti cleanup past this year.
I believe those were just one time, or there was a period of time based on those commitments. So, and again, if council wishes to continue with those, that's something we can add.
All right, thank you, I'm good.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. One thing again, and I mentioned it earlier, is the need for the expansion to the RCMP detachment or the move over. Because if we do the move and it doesn't go the way we see, we lose a lot of rent from the federal side of the house. So I think that's something we need to get more information on, because that's got some significant, I would believe, budget consequences. And the other thing too with that is, like, if Canada Labour Code comes into play with that, then we're going to have no option.
Mr. Adolph.
Worship, part of the facility assessment is to flag the larger, as well as many of the smaller projects. So the RCMP building is, you know, it's past its prime in terms of investment. It needs some work. There's no question. It's quite crowded. In sections of that, we're looking for interim solutions to alleviate some of that pressure. It's not all our officers or our administrative staff as part of that. So it's one of the larger buildings. Another one is the Public Works Yard, which is primarily a collection of trailers and some aging buildings on site. A study has been underway on that site to look at how to manage some sort of future large-scale project. I'll say there's a number of other, more on the recreational side of things, projects that are well past their prime. We often hear about the Chase River Community Center, the Curling Club, as well as some of the other buildings that Mr. Harding indicated in terms of roofs and that type of thing. So we have a collection of pieces that need to be put into a big rational pot and then determine priorities and funding schemes. And I do hearken to the mayor's comments about partnerships. I think one of the solutions for the city is to seek alternate approval or alternate processes and partnerships that may include other partners to save money and to expedite the execution of some of these projects. So there's certainly large projects like the police and the Public Works Yard and several other facilities I think we could put on that list, which will be hopefully fleshed out through the facility study and inform future decision making. But there is very little room in our current capital plan to address some of these projects at this time. And the RCMP could be a potentially very expensive project if we were to find a long-term solution for some of the current space challenges in that building.
Follow up. Thank you. Public Works was one of my ones, so thank you very much. I think that's something that we need to be aware of, that building is, well, if you can't even call them buildings, really has to be looked at. And I also want to echo Councillor Brown's comments about the cranberry. I think it's a super important thing. I would have put it ahead of Mitchell Drive myself, because I think there's more need there than there is Mitchell Drive, but I think it's really important. I don't think the capacity is there for that road to handle it. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure who this is addressed to, but it's a question with regard to parking infrastructure program. And my question with regard to the Bastion Street Parkade renewal of traffic membranes. That seems to be an ongoing thing. Is there any idea of how frequently the membranes have to be replaced, or are they done one or two floors at a time, or just?
Through your worship to Councillor Turley. So the membrane replacement program it's intended for areas of the parkades, whether it's Bastion or Harbourfront or Port of Nanaimo Centre, that are exposed to the elements or that are suspended. So if one of the slabs is on grade, you wouldn't put a membrane like that on that area. So Port of Nanaimo Centre Parkade is actually a good example where there's only two parts of coming into the parkade off of the two accesses that you would do the membrane on. The main parkade itself, there wouldn't be a membrane there. So I don't know what the life expectancy of the membrane is, but if I'm remembering correctly, it's around 10 years, and then you have that on like a 10-year cycle.
Okay.
And the reason why it's so expensive this time around is because we never did it from the beginning, so it really, we're kind of like starting from starting new again, and then having to reinstate kind of a maintenance program to make sure we get the life out of that membrane.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, I was moving ahead and then you... Oh, well, very good. We have staff 3. Ms. Fuller, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to answer Councillor Hammond's question. So when we look at the urban forestry management strategy, that is the supporting documents that support projects in the plan, and we classify them by the main supporting document. So there could be other projects in the plan that are supporting the urban forestry management strategy. It's just not the main project supporting it. And actually, we have 3 projects in the plan that are all actually new projects to the project plan. We have 2 phases of Bevan Park Scan Management Program from 2020 and 2021 and 2021 strategy. And then we're also starting a new condition program, a National Park Areas Assessment Program, and that has 5-year funding, and that's in support of that strategy.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is also on parking, one of them. We have listed in here in 2021, parking equipment, $34,000. Now, I remember earlier this year, council voted to install signage along Wallace Street and a number of other streets where the parking meters had been vandalized. And at that time, there was supposed to be a parking study done in that area, but that got shelved in the 6 months report that you guys sent me. So I'm wondering, are we not going to be putting parking meters in any of those areas now, or what is the $34,000 for?
Through Your Worship, I can't speak to the $34,000, but the downtown mobility study is what's actually capturing the review of parking in the downtown. So that's going to be guiding us on when, where, and how we price the parking throughout the downtown.
I see, okay. And I guess my other question, if I may, is how do we find out what that $34,000 is for? Or in any of these items in here, in 2021 or 2022, if I want to know what this particular line item is to build something, or where do I find out exactly what it's for?
I think that Councillor Bonner really means, who do I talk to?
Or who do I talk to, yes.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner, Ms. Fulla's department produces this report, so all the backup sits in financial planning. So if you had questions on any specific line item, we can give you that information. And she's just pulling it up now, so she'll be able to tell you what exactly that $34,500 is for, assuming we can find it.
That was more of an example than anything, but...
Yeah. But yes, it is.
Perhaps while Ms. Fuller looks, we have 4 others, so we'll go to Councillor Turley next, and then we'll get back to you, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. My question is around the 5 items regarding dam inspections and review report and inundation study, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, there's 5 different line items there, and I'm wondering what they are actually referring to. Thank you, Mr. Sims.
So, Your Worship, can you, I'm sorry, Councillor Charlie, could you just repeat the ones that you were reading?
Yeah, under the, I guess it's page, I'm not sure what page it is, 30 I've got on my sheet. Under asset management plans, there's 5 line items. One is dam inundation study. The next one is dam safety regulations, and then dam safety reviews, and then formal annual dam inspections, and formal annual dam review report.
So you can imagine there's a lot of dam work to go on. But I've been waiting for that one, but so a number of these are on an annual basis. We need to do engineered inspections of all our dams. The city owns 10 dams for information. Every 10 years, we do a formal annual or a dam safety review, that's the sort of title for it. These are legislatively driven, so that's what that line item is. It's a single year where we bring in engineers to do that. There's also the flood inundation study is for our Jump Creek and South Fork dams, just to measure the impact to downstream properties. We need to update that from about 20 years ago. That's another dam safety requirement, regulation requirement. And then the others are any of the projects sort of following out of the annual reviews or the dam safety reviews. We've got an allowance built in to the budget to fund exactly that. So that's what kind of covers all those off.
Thank you.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some further specific questions. These are under strategic organizational plans / studies. We have $75,000 budgeted next year for core review. What is that in relation to, other than the core review?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Hemmons. So are you looking from on page 30 of the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the core review, that is as Ms. Fuller was just talking about, the urban forestry management strategy. The core service review is the main supporting document for that project.
Oh, okay.
So it's just that was identified.
So it's the Parks and Rec Master Plan?
It's the part. It references the Parks and Recreation. Sorry, what?
Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan.
Master Plan.
Okay.
The core review identified that needed to be updated.
Okay. Thank you. And if I may, the cultural plan for Creative Nanaimo has $50,000 allotted over the next 5 years. Can you tell me more about that? Are we going to do a little bit of work on the plan every year?
Through the chair to Councillor Hammonds, again, that is the supporting document for a project. If it's $50,000 a year, that is probably in reference to our public art program.
Okay.
So those aren't actual projects, those are the supporting documents that support a project. So why we do that page is to show you how all the master plans that we bring you tie into the project plan that you see. So that way you can say, hey, we have brought you the transportation master plan, and now you can see projects that are being executed that are supported by the transportation master plan. Okay. So it's to tie that, make that connection for you between all the master plans that come to you and then the project staff actually execute.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
And if I can just jump in, I can answer that parking question at the same time. So that ties back to the business case that was approved last year for the hospital area parking, and that is phase 2 of the parking meters.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a very minor point, but I'm curious, under project costs, page 35 in my agenda, I noticed the budget for Public Works Day is there for 2020, but not beyond. And I don't recall it being a year-by-year decision in past. Is this something that we don't plan on doing or that we need to discuss each year? It seems to me it's been a very popular and well-received program.
Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe, the department at this time just requested funding for 1 year. So at this point, they've been engaging the program each year and requesting funding for the next year based on that success.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you, I think to Ms. Fuller, but if it's for someone else, please correct me. Just noticed in the reserve funds, in particular, the emission reduction reserve, the housing legacy reserve, and the sustainability reserve have nothing going into them after 2020.
Through your worship to Councillor Brown, what page are you referencing?
31. 31, thank you. 3 of 17.
And sorry, which reserves were you looking at again? Sorry.
The emission reduction reserve, the housing legacy, and the sustainability reserve.
These are just the funding sources for the projects in the budget or in the project plan. So it's not actually. it's not contributions, it's not the actual fund balance, it's just what those reserves are what projects they're funding. So if the 911 equipment reserve, it's funding $10,860 of projects within 2020.
So it's money is going out?
Yes, it's money going out.
Okay. Thank you very much. How do we know that from these sheets when presented then?
Okay, so at the, about halfway down the page, it says funding sources.
Right.
So those are the funding sources for projects. So if you see the total types of projects at the top is 51,987,000 and change. Then you see where it says funding sources, and these are the funding sources for all of the projects that make up that 51.9 million. So if you see the total projects are 51.9, and then all of the funding sources also add up to 51.9 million.
Okay, so then it's things like the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve where they have 900,000 and it's just set amount.
Yeah.
That's clearly then a project that like is such a round number in comparison to some of the other ones.
Yeah, and so out of that one, I know exactly what it is. It's the $300,000 for sidewalk projects, as well as $600,000 for the property acquisition. Okay. And those are ongoing withdrawals from that reserve. And in 2023, we also had some money for the Wilcox access, secondary access, coming out of this reserve as well.
Right, okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're finished?
I am, yeah.
Sorry.
I said thank you, yeah.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, through you to Ms. Mercer. I'm curious about the allocation of resources to our committees. Our Environment Committee has quadrupled the funds available to the other committees, and I'm curious why. Are we expecting more work to come from that committee, more projects? Just I gotta ask. Is that a staff, do we just, I'm curious how we arrive at that figure.
So actually, there was no rationale behind that. It was taking the previous committees under the previous council funds and transferring them to the new committees. So the Parks, Recreation and Culture Committee dollars that it had assigned to it, we transferred into the Environment Committee. So we're hoping all the committees' budgets have their separate line items. However, if one or more committees spends more, we can work in that total budget of the committees.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just another one.
Councillor Thorpe says I have to be quicker, Councillor Bonner. What do you think?
I'm sure we can figure that out later. So I have a question regarding, I'm on actually page 16 of the actual document, so I don't know where it is in the agenda. And it's project costs related to street lights. In 2020, we have a line item in renewal projects of 494. And then we also have in new upgrades of 641,000, which is, better part of $1 million in 2020. And then it drops down considerably in the renewal to 50,000 each year. I'm just wondering why it's so much in this one particular year, because I thought we were spreading the new ones out over a period of time, which I see that in the new upgrades, but I'm not sure why that one isn't in there.
Through your worship, Councillor Bonner, I think I don't have the information right in front of me, but the amount for next year is for the downtown streetlights, so it's the renewal of the remaining globe lights and those box lights that are just remaining downtown. And if you recall, when I presented at the Finance and Audit meeting last week, there was a slide I had that showed the street names. So like Front Street, there's a little bit on Front Street. There's about 3 locations on Terminal and stuff like that. So that's that piece there. And then the the LED streetlight conversion. That's spread over I believe it's 4 years now.
I see that.
So that's it then.
Okay. And well, on the same page, we have transit amenities, and it's in renewal projects, it's 75,000 in 2020. Down to new, are those numbers bus stops typically, and the 900,000 is in 2023 for what?
Better than flipping through Doomsday Book.
Everybody's going to start using transit on that year.
Probably for new.
I thought they would have it done by then.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Was it 2023, you said?
2023, we have 900,000 in transit amenities.
New upgrades.
New upgrades, and is that the downtown transit hub? Okay, so it's not that.
What page?
16, yeah, on the report.
Through your worship, Councillor Bonner. So it appears that there's a project that's been miscoded to transit amenities. It's actually a transportation improvement project. So it's about $700,000 of that is miscoded to a transit amenity. So
do I get a star for that or something?
Gold star.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure we'll get it sorted out then. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much to staff for the presentation. Appreciate it very much. Council's had a chance to express some musings around things that are important. I think there's no question. We look at the south end of the community who are looking for a community centre over time and solutions to their ongoing traffic problems. And I hope that the public who's been watching are reassured tonight that we are not abandoning nor are we unaware of the significant traffic issues that are faced in the south end, particularly as the Sandstone project is on the horizon and other pressures that will occur for those folks trying to move reasonably through the community. On to reports. The next is the Downtown Priority Projects Update and Funding Request. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just asked to be passed around a copy of the, if you recall, this is the graphic recording that we did at your July GPC. And last week when we were hoping to have this discussion down in the boardroom, we had it up on the wall behind council, and I thought we'd just bring down a hard copy and kind of refresh you of that day and the discussions that you had around the downtown and the priority areas that you talked about at that time. Of course, following that meeting in July, we came back to you in August and had fleshed out some ideas and options around how to do improvements and touch on each of these areas in our downtown core. Today we're here to partly give you an update on those individual projects and also present some options for council's consideration. So in this in-between time, we've had plenty of internal discussions between all the different divisions and departments. But also some good discussions with groups representing the downtown, including a number of meetings with the Old City Quarter, and you can see a number of projects in this list that have come out of those discussions. I think it's important to note that this is really a list for council to consider, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Corson in a minute to run through them, but we really also want to leave some space for council to have some of your options considered and discussed, and we're hoping that could also occur here today. We've also tried to break this list down. I think it's important to note that there are projects on there where we are looking for additional funding to help move some of these projects forward. And we've identified projects which are going to be done under existing budgets. And of course, Your Worship, that doesn't mean those projects are free. It simply means that we either have existing budgets, or it means quite often that there's other areas in the community, for example, which will get a lower level of service as we concentrate efforts in the downtown. And a good example of that, obviously, is our street sweeping and increased cleaning in the downtown. We don't have a larger budget to do that. We don't have additional staff. But what it means is by putting additional emphasis downtown, it means that somewhere else isn't getting the same level of service that they would have previously. So last week, I guess at the Finance and Audit meeting, the earlier version of this meeting this evening, we talked, you had a discussion about your strategic infrastructure reserve, and that it was timely, and that it's where a number of these projects where we're actually recommending funding come from that reserve to move these forward, and we'll talk about each of those as Mr. Corson works through. So just for the presentation, Mr. Corson's going to walk us through outline the list of projects, and then he's going to turn it over to Mr. Rose, who's going to talk about downtown infrastructure and transportation improvements under this initiative. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Mr. Corson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Lindsay stole my opening act, so I cut down a few slides here. Just when you look at the visioning exercise we did, we came up with 5 areas that we wanted to focus on. So one was public realm, another was One Port Drive, additional one was redevelopment of key sites, social issues, and then mobility, Front Street, waterfront walkway. So those are the 5 areas we've identified projects through. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about the public realm improvements, and there's about 23 projects I'm going to take you through. And then Jamie, Mr. Rose will take you through some of the mobility ones. So the other areas, such as One Port Drive, we'll be coming back to you with a report with specific short-term and long-term improvements for One Port Drive. We're also going to come back to you with a discussion on redevelopment of key sites in the downtown core. That'll be a separate report. And we have our GPC next Monday on bylaw services, and we'll probably get into a discussion then about some of the social issues downtown. So in terms of the 23, please just, if you have questions, stop me as I go into these. I'll just give you a broad overview of each project. So this is one we identified for you. The first one is one we identified back in July, and this is to light up the Great National Land Building. And when we first brought this to you, the idea was to light it up from the ground upwards. We're now looking at doing this on the building itself, downlighting, which would really make this signature building stand out in the evening. So in order to do that, we don't have funding for that at the moment, so we'd be asking for $25,000 additional dollars for that one. Another one, next one is the proposed Hilton project site, which has been the hole in the ground for a while. And Mr. Lindsay has had conversations with the property owner and asked them if they could do a enhanced level of hoarding and beautification around the site, and they've agreed to do that, so we should see them working on that over the winter months. Another project is the backlighting of the Port Theatre, and we talked about this again back in August. The idea is to just bring some animation and interest to the property in the evening, and in order to do that, the machine that we need is $10,000, so we're asking for that as additional funding. One of the projects that we think is a priority for downtown is wayfinding, and these are examples of the new street signage that's been put up on the Bastion Bridge. What we'd like to do is take this style of wayfinding and introduce it throughout the downtown core. So we've been working with a design consultant who would be able to go off and recreate these on a smaller scale, and then get these additional signage up in the downtown core for early next year. So we're looking, asking council for $100,000 of additional funding for wayfinding.
Councillor Bonner has a question.
Thank you. On that, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Corson. On that very same thing, the wayfinding signage that we're doing, is it more generic? This is this district, this, that district? Or will it be like they have in malls where you can actually see a map and this is where this particular store is? And
Yes, the idea is that there'll be a map attached to each of these, so you can go to it, figure out where you are in the downtown. There'll be, for instance, this says the Arts District. There'll be another one that'll have, sorry, I've lost my district names. But each one will be branded for the part of the town it's in. So we're doing one in the Old City Quarter, so there would be one up there that would have Old City Quarter branding on it, but with the same style. Yeah.
And the map would be on there?
And a map of the Old City Quarter and how it, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Just curious where this district names come from, because I've never heard anybody in Nanaimo refer to these district areas.
I think when Mr. Harding was sitting in the field and downtown sprung up, he came up with the ideas back then. So. Sorry. Actually, Mr. Lindsay might know. I'm not too sure.
I don't think, through your worship, Councillor Brown, I don't think there's one answer for each district. I think some of them have developed organically over time. I do know that when we did the downtown plan a number of years ago, it was at that time, was the first time I saw it formalized and actually have a number of the districts identified at that time.
Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship. As I outdate Mr. Harding, I can probably answer it better than he can. No offense. So that actually occurred when I was president of the Nanaimo City Centre Association in the late 1990s, and working with, it was more of a marketing tool to help people kind of identify what area was where. And at that time, Commercial Street had a lot more art type stores involved, and the Old City Quarter, and the other one was the waterfront along the waterfront walkway. So there were the three areas. So.
Great.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you for the information. I think this is a great project. Just a point of caution, wayfinding is only, it only works if the names and the directions mean something. So that's the only reason I'm asking that question, is if we want people to find their way, we just need to make sure that they, the signs and the markers all allow them to do so.
Excellent. Okay. The next project is Tideline Park, and this has been led in the past by Planning Design Development Nanaimo, and they've done a concept plan, as you can see on the screen there. They would like to move forward with the project next year, and Mr. Harding might want to speak to you more about this project itself, but the idea is the PDDN would be able to leverage funding and volunteer hours into the project, as well as the city using our parks parks. What's the PIP? Partners in Parks, thank you. Partners in Parks program to actually contribute that way. So there's no additional funding from the city. It'll be drawn from existing budgets. And the goal is to get started on this next spring and have it up and running. We have a more mundane project, but an important one is just is updating the street lights in downtown. And Mr. Rosen spoke about that project, about the renewal, but this is actually painting the teal lights in the downtown core to a common black color. So this will be, the bridge was supposed to be done now, but because of the change in weather, we're not going to be able to do it. So that'll be early next spring with the rest of the street lights downtown being refreshed. This is the next one is the trail connection between Fitzwilliam and Robson Street. And right now there's a sidewalk that goes through there, but it's not very friendly. So the idea is to work with Public Works and Parks to make this a much more safe and inviting environment through here. And we're asking for $20,000 of funding to upgrade this connection.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, to Mr. Carson, is there lighting going to be involved along this path, or?
Sorry, is there?
Is there lighting to be involved?
Yes.
Thank you.
He says with great confidence.
Yes. Okay, the next one, again, was really a maintenance project, but this was to refresh the street lines in the downtown core and some of the crosswalks, and that was done back in September, so that project is complete. No additional funding required. This is just an example of a water fountain, but there are a number of water fountains downtown that are not working at the moment, so those are going to be replaced. And those will be funded out of existing budgets. So again, just kind of refreshing existing infrastructure that may have been forgotten in the last little while, so good project. The eternal light next to the cenotaph has been turned off, and so the goal is to relight the eternal light. Otherwise, its name doesn't really make sense. And from a sustainability perspective, it used to be a gas light. Obviously, if we're trying to fight climate change, we don't want to reinstall it with natural gas, so we're looking at a solar option for this light. And we should be able to do that within existing budgets. Again, as Mr. Lindsay mentioned before, so we've allocated more resources to street sweeping in the downtown core and increasing our power washing efforts. No additional funding is required for this, but there is a cost to it. And as Mr. Lindsay mentioned, it's coming from, there's less service elsewhere in the city to focus this in the downtown core. And this is underway at the moment. This has been taking place. The temporary art program. So we had a question about, in the previous discussion about the $50,000. So we have the money that goes into temporary art. Right now, most of it is focused along the Waterfront Walkway and in Maffeo Sutton Park. We'd actually like to expand the program and bring it actually up into the downtown core, potentially the old city quarter, other locations downtown. And the money is in place, so it's just a matter of us actually rejigging the program. The RFP is out right now for artists, so hopefully we can get this in place for early next year. One of the ideas that came up was to do a mural program.
Councillor
Nope, sorry.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Did we discuss the water fountains, or did we miss that? My reason I had a question for that is it says it's completed. And I remember when we went on our tour of the downtown, there was one of the couple of water fountains that just didn't work at all and probably need to be replaced. Is that now done? I'm not sure where that's at.
Your Worship, Council Bonner, one is ordered and the others have just been tweaked and repaired. So the other two are been working. The other two we noticed, but the one at the cenotaph, we had to order a new one. It's on order now.
Okay, right, thanks. And if I may, because we're on the mural thing, I'm quite interested in the mural program. I don't think the amount of money is enough, right? So I was wondering how one would go about, as an example, and again, this falls under the nice to have but don't need category. And I'm wondering how we would possibly increase that to, say, $100,000, but fund it out of surplus if it's available. So the way, to me, it would work is that if there's a surplus available, then that would get topped up to $100,000 and be able to use as grants for the next year. If there wasn't, then it wouldn't be available for grants next year, but it would also be in conjunction with the owners of the properties chipping in money as well. So I'm just kind of curious where people are heading with that one.
So right now, the way it's set up, this would be part of the downtown grant program, and people would apply through downtown grant program to do a mural program. If council wished to have additional funding put towards it, then certainly this would be the right venue to tweak these. So the idea was to bring this list to council to get your feedback. And if there is additional funding you wish to put towards these projects, then we can certainly make that adjustment today. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that.
My looking at it, these are just the one-offs we're doing just right now, but as an ongoing thing, I wouldn't mind seeing a significant amount of money in that program, but a whole setup where there would be wouldn't necessarily be a grant, but it'd be all part of the property owner as well contributing to it, maybe on a 60-40 split or something along those lines. I'm just not sure 30,000 is enough to get a whole bunch of places painted in downtown.
Yeah, I think next year would really be maybe a bit of a pilot, and then from that, the culture department would be able to then develop a proper program, like you say, with matching funding, et cetera.
Okay.
For what it's worth, Councillor Bonner, I think the concept of public art like this, murals, is a wonderful thing. It serves as a wonderful way to temporarily increase the beauty of the city and its attractiveness and livability. And we have some incredible artists, as we know, like Jeff King in town, who've done some amazing work over the years. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. On the mural program, like the new research is showing, and there's cases here in Nanaimo, you can look at Irwin Street, you can go down to the murals over by the old Canadian Tire there, where they're all being tagged. So would we have a budget at least for maintenance? Like maybe for something we can talk to with Mr. Hornby when he comes, who's one of our experts on that, because that's one of the things cities are moving away from now because of the maintenance. So perhaps we could have a more fulsome discussion around that at our bylaws meeting. I've got lots of examples from different places where I can send to you where they're moving away from it because of the cost of maintenance. We don't budget for that, so then it just sits there graffiti tagged and it just stays there because who's responsible? Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Corson. Just with a mural program, would that sort of what that program would look like would be to be determined? Say, for example, if we wanted to do a festival around it or something like that.
Yes, I'd suggest we're in the early genesis of the program, and it's open to growth and new ideas. Yep.
Right on. Thank you.
I don't know if I found a very good picture for this one, but small-scale whimsical art interventions. So these are small, yeah. And so I'm not too sure. This is, again, a program that we would be looking. Our culture department talked to some of the local artist community and asked if we were to do some of these small-scale artistic conventions downtown, how much money would you be looking for? What would the budget be? And they came up with this number. So if this were to be approved, then our culture department would work with the artist community to come up with some ideas for what could go downtown. Probably not gnome doors, but something else. Mr. Harding just spoke to you about the Maffeo-Sutton Park upgrade that's happening later this year, early next year. So I won't go back over that, but that's going to be a great addition to Maffeo-Sutton Park. Diana Krall redevelopment plan. So Dr. Dave Whitty from VIU has approached us and would like to do a project with his students to come up with a redevelopment plan for Diana Krall Plaza. And this would involve looking at all the past work that's been done, doing some charrette work, and then coming back to present to council with his ideas and the students' ideas as to what we could do there. So they've asked for $20,000 of funding to go through this exercise.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I was going through some old photos the other day, and I noticed, actually someone posted on Twitter too, of there used to be tables and chairs in the plaza, and I was just curious, where did they go? They were cement circular ones.
I believe they were removed during Occupy Nanaimo. Mr. Harding probably knows where they went.
Those damn occupiers.
Your Worship, Councillor Brown, we actually had two different aspects. We remember we had the Merlot boxed down there. That's actually, when DMPA was active, the idea was we had chairs and tables in there that would be brought out by the merchants during the day and put back at night. So that lasted for a little bit. And, that organization wasn't able to sustain that anymore. Then we put in the tables, but from merchants' complaint of different activities over the years, there was just too many people hanging around, particularly in front of the bank, and we removed them just based on just weren't working in that area as a permanent structure.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Next project is some temporary traffic calming on Fitzwilliam. So right now the old city quarter has been voluntarily trying to do some traffic calming in the neighborhood with cones. And this would be us actually formalizing it, so Mr. Rose and his team would be able to, at low cost, be able to try to slow down vehicles coming through Fitzwilliam. Again, it's not within, we can do this within existing budget, so we're not asking for any funding.
Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, through you to Mr. Corson. What can we do for $1,000 for traffic calming on Fitzwilliam? What does that look like? You knew I was going to ask, right?
I don't want to steal Mr. Rose's. I believe he's going to be installing one of those, kind of like we have in the cycle lane sometimes, the plastic barriers.
The bollards, yeah.
That, so when you come up to it, you visually slow down, even though you're not going to hit it, you actually visually slow down. So there'll be a cone with a sign on it that just says caution. It'll be right at the crosswalk so that people are slowing down for the two crosswalks in the old city quarter. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
I'm kind of curious, if I may, bollards, I'm sure they work, but a painted crosswalk, I think, adds something to the community that bollards don't. And I'm seeing we have one on Victoria Crescent that's going in. We know the ones people love downtown at Commercial and Bastion. It seems like a low-cost item that slows cars down, that increases resident pride, that creates a bit of a landscape, more than plastic bollards. I don't know if that requires a response. That was just a comment.
I think Mr. Rose would like to respond.
I think maybe I should add some clarity. So what we're actually planning on doing here is working with ICBC to put some in-street crosswalk signs. So they sit on the bollards, but they actually are referenced to the crosswalk signs, and they say yield to the crosswalk sign. They've actually proven to be quite effective at increasing driver behavior, improving driver behavior around crosswalks. So.
Thank you.
That's why I'm not an engineer. Okay. Downtown tree lighting. So this is one that we're working on right now. We used to have proper lighting downtown for the trees. That's some of them are broken over time, and would like council's approval to additional funding to update the tree lighting on Wesley Street and down on Commercial Street. So that's an ask of $10,000 to buy the lights and have them installed properly. This is a project that's come up through our discussions with the Old City Quarter, and these are to make some public realm and landscaping improvements on Wesley Street itself. One is under what's a bean tree? What's the tree called? The bean tree? Yeah. To actually remove the landscaping there and actually create a plaza there that could then be used for outdoor seating for patio or cafe. The top image is one that we think is where the public art could go in the Old City Quarter, and actually removing a portion of the grass and actually hardscaping that. It would also provide potentially a performance venue in that area. So these are two projects that we'd like to, again, move on end of this year, and there would be additional funding required. There's also some additional maintenance of landscaping on Wesley Street that we'd like to, we've done some work at the very end of Wesley Street by Franklin Street, but to go back and improve that area. This again is another request from the Old City Quarter, which is to install proper lighting in the Selby parking lot, the gravel parking lot. Right now it's not lit. We have funding. We would likely take a typical Cobra light that we have in our supplies and install it. So there's no additional funding required from council, but it's just one that the Old City Quarter has asked for from a safety perspective. The transit exchange across from the police station had a few planters in it, and the idea here is to actually relocate those planters from the transit exchange down to Victoria Crescent, and that should be underway at the moment. Again, no funding required. It's just a matter of us actually moving the planters down to the Crescent, and that was done in conjunction with the association. The last... Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Corson. Driving downtown on the weekend, we noticed the downtown tree lighting and it's already very effective. And that it reminds me, along with the landscaping and the planters, to ask about two things, and just get a quick comment if I could. One is Christmas seasonal decorations for downtown, and the second is our hanging basket program for downtown. Could you just give us an update on those two items? Is anything new planned? Are we discontinuing? Are we funding?
So I'll do my best to answer those questions, and maybe Mr. Lindsay will pop in if I'm off track. So we do have Christmas decorations for the downtown, but they are aging. So we do still have those at our disposal. At some point, we need to likely refresh those. I don't think there's anything in the budget to do that at the moment, but that might be within a year or two. We probably want to start thinking that way. And the hanging basket program is, it's just, which is Commercial Street and Wesley Street. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Harding mentioned that the planter program is continuing year to year, so it's continually funded. It's continually
funded. And if I may follow up, Your Worship, then is that a cost sharing program with the merchants? I just wanted Mr. Harding to get back up to the microphone.
Your Worship, no, it's not a cost sharing. It was years and years ago, but it turned out when we started doing the numbers, it was within 5 to 10% of the overall costs were from donations and demise of other parts of the groups. It was just easier just to continue on with the program as a city hanging basket program. And we've then expanded to some other areas throughout the city, particularly some of our recreation centers and other locations. McPhail Sutton, you'll see them at McPhail Sutton also.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I think regarding the Christmas decorations, they're nearing their end of life, I think the term is. I do have a question, though, regarding planters. And we have some, and we've been moving around some. I would, from a personal point of view, or at least where I can help make some decisions, I'd like to see dozens and dozens and dozens more planters downtown and in the areas around downtown part of Nanaimo. Do we have any plans to do that in the future? Is it coming to us as a business case?
The only ones we're adding with is working with the Victoria Crescent Group, or adding more, where we're working with them on getting the planters to them and some material, but they're planting and maintaining it. So we're actually not expanding a lot of the planter program at this point, continuing with the hanging basket program, but not necessarily the planter program.
And on something similar to that is amenities for people to sit. Having done some research just recently, our elderly folks who frequent our downtown, a lot of times they require, or it helps them if there's, when they're sitting on benches, that they have armrests to be able to help them get up. And I notice we don't have any of that downtown. As we're going along and as our population is aging, is there any plans to put our places where people sit with amenities that allow them to get in and out easier?
I would say so in some of our recreation facilities we've been doing that. We need to do more of that. In this area, we haven't talked about that as staff, of adding more into the downtown area. So that's something we would need to take back and look at those, particularly at some specific areas where you're thinking, or council may be thinking in order to add more.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor. I just popped you on, Councillor Armstrong,
Yeah.
and I think you had.
You might want to stay, Mr. Harding. My understanding is when they used to exist, and when the SEPTED analysis was done, the recommendation was to remove the plants, remove the benches as well, and the crime significantly reduced. Unfortunately, Mr. LaBerge isn't here because he was part of that. Have we taken that into consideration, and have we discussed that based on a SEPTED principle, or are we just going to do it?
Well, as of today, we're not introducing any new benches or anything in the downtown core. I think one of the things that just came to mind was, again, these are all short-term projects that we're looking at doing, like really between now and next summer. We will be coming back to you with another report on downtown, which are like longer-term, medium to longer-term investments you might want to make in the downtown core, which may include a refresh of, larger public realm improvements, right, which might include Commercial Street being rebuilt, or which would then include ideas such as street furniture, et cetera.
Well, I guess my question is, though, is that we made the decision to remove them all to eliminate the crime, help eliminate the crime, but now we're putting them back. Has that been discussed with?
We're not putting any back.
Yeah, the planters going down to Victoria
planters.
Crescent.
We're putting
yeah.
planters back, sorry, not benches.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that were removed, is one of the steps to make it safer. So I guess that's my question. Has that been looked at?
The neighborhood association actually asked for these as part of, they're quite active in terms of monitoring the area for social issues. So they're the ones that asked for it. They thought it made a difference down there.
Thank you.
And speaking of the Victoria Crescent, so we updated the sidewalk down there, I believe it was last year. One of the things we were going to do at the time was actually brand it with the Crescent in the sidewalk area, and that was not done at the time. So the associations asked us if we would go back and actually correct that. So we've added that as an additional budget request for $5,000, which would have branding of the Crescent on both sides of the crosswalk. And this is kind of a fun one. So a lot of the cities now have their names as 6-foot high, 5-foot high 3D signs. The Toronto one's obviously a larger one that's lit. But the idea would be create an Nanaimo sign that we could have down on the waterfront. It'd be movable, so we could have it in the downtown core, maybe for night market or other events, from a tourism perspective, and just to kind of help brand Nanaimo and give it a positive Instagram selfie look. So we'd be, again, we've asked, we have some rough quotes for how much it would cost, and $10,000 seems to be the money we would need for that. So we're asking for that as additional funding requirement.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Corson. Would that be permanent, or would that just only come up when events are happening?
I believe we'd keep it downtown permanently, but it'd be movable, so we could relocate it if, I'm just thinking if it's bathtub weekend, you could have it down in Mattheson Park. Right. But if there's something happening on Commercial Street, we could bring it up there. Or if there's different places we thought, wherever people are congregating, we can move it to. Okay. But likely, I think it would be something like the picture frame, where everybody wanted to get their picture taken with it, so,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So those are the end of the public realm projects. The total funding request or ask for that is $220,000. And then Mr. Rose will take you through his request for the Front Street projects.
Hi again. So, as you all know, we're going through the downtown mobility project right now, and through that we're teasing out some ideas, refining our plans, and coming up with a bigger picture for the downtown, for mobility downtown. As part of that, we've seen some opportunities that we think we can act on quite quickly with fairly low investment. And so there's a couple of different locations which we can just go through here. If you've got any questions, please feel free to stop me or pause me. So Bastion Commercial Street, this is one where we want to see if there's an opportunity to enhance the pedestrian experience there. It's a traffic signal that we know needs to be rebuilt in the very near future. And so we're looking at different options for what we can do that will make it more inviting for pedestrians, potentially break down any barriers or perceptions of barriers with Bastion Street between the north and south sides of downtown as well. The slip lane on Front Street. So this is from a transportation perspective.
Councillor Turley has a question.
Go ahead and finish that part, because I have a question about that. So.
Perfect. So from a transportation perspective, this is redundant, and it just creates a situation where we've got more travel lanes than we really need. So we see this as an opportunity to take back some of the road and repurpose it and incorporate it into the square around the cenotaph. And so the quick win is going to be to close it off. The longer term, we're going to have some opportunities to add some landscaping or some features to really create some placemaking.
Yes, through your worship. The concern I have is the loading zone in front of the RBC, which is used primarily, which is on the west side of Commercial Street. It's used primarily by 5-ton trucks and the armed guard picking up the money from the bank. My question is, are they going to be able to get around that corner off of Front Street onto Church Street?
Through your worship, yeah, we want to make sure that any vehicles that need to get in there will be able to make the turn. The way we're going to be reassigning the space for travel lanes actually moves them over, so the tight radius on that corner that's there right now actually becomes a much more functional radius for larger vehicles.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Rose. I realize it's only once a year, but November the 11th ceremonies at the Cenotaph always draw a very large crowd. And I'm just wondering if Legion representatives will be consulted regarding changes to the configuration of that area.
Through your worship, we can definitely, we're going to be consulting with all of the stakeholders in the community. Right now, we've sort of are creating a blank canvas for ourselves, so where we take that is really going to be guided by the community.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Okay. So one of the most fun conversations we've had through this process is the intersection of Commercial Wallace, Albert, and Victoria Crescent. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it, and I know when we did our walkabout, everybody kind of stopped and looked at it and just sort of picked up their jaws and continued on. So, so far it's definitely been one of the top 5 topics through the Downtown Mobility Project. It's definitely a concern on many people's minds, so we're going to look at ways that we can address that fairly cheaply and quickly. So we're actually going to be introducing making it into a 4-way stop. So this is something that's been sort of toyed with for years, and there's always been a bit of concern about how it could impact the highway, but we've had some conversations, we've done some investigations, and at this point we don't see that as being a reason to not proceed and try it. So, and with that, we may even be able to take some opportunities and expand things like the night market or the Crescent Days down Commercial Street as maybe more frequent closures.
Councillor Armstrong has a question.
And on that, has MOTI been consulted as well? Because I know that is one of the concerns, because they're already blocking the road sometimes going through there.
Yeah, through your worship. So MOTI has been at the table for all of our conversations, and they've reviewed all of our assessments. And so for the
Councillor Bonner has a question too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, before we get into this topic, I have one regarding streetlights and intersections and things like that. I had an interesting altercation with a motorist down at on the corner of the highway and Commercial there, and they were trying to beat the pedestrian traffic by turning right, and didn't do very well. And so I'm wondering, when we were over at UBCM, I noticed that Vancouver, the pedestrian walk signal goes forward first. There's a slight pause, and then the light turns green. And I'm wondering if that's something that we looked at doing here, and would we be able to do it at that intersection without getting the province involved?
We can look at doing it on our traffic signals. The ministry owns and operates the traffic signal at Commercial and the highway. So we would need to consult with them and work with them to introduce a pedestrian lead, as you identified.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, we can definitely bring that question up. I'm not sure how they would respond to it, but we can definitely ask it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So the big one, the Front Street cycle track. So as part of the overall, the big downtown project, we've identified that we want to put a traffic or a cycling loop to connect into all of the bikeways that extend out from the downtown. Through the process, we also heard that a lot of people feel that Front Street is a barrier for walking, biking, just getting from downtown to the waterfront. And so we've looked into it, and there's a lot of opportunity to reassign the space out there. It's currently a 4-lane cross-section for a good chunk of it, and we don't need that sort of capacity. So a quick, fairly relatively inexpensive rollout we saw was the opportunity to introduce a cycle track on the water side and redistribute parking on the downtown side. So there's 3 key benefits that I see to this. One is the introduction of the cycle track, which will link in Port Drive to Matteo Sutton and beyond. We're shortening up the pedestrian crossings at all of the intersections, which reduces pedestrian exposure, creates a much more comfortable crossing experience. And we're actually getting a net gain of on-street parking along Front Street. So we are losing some parking along the east side in the 1538 areas of Front Street, but we're actually picking up an extra 10 to 12 spots down toward the Port Theatre and in that area. So we've got a couple of renderings if you guys want to have a look at. And one other thing, just going back to the question about additional opportunities for landscaping. The way Front Street sits right now, it actually has quite a variable width. It floats by about 1 meter. And so some areas we will only be able to fit about a 1 foot wide painted or delineated buffer for the cycle track, but there are areas where we actually have a little over 1 meter, and we'd actually be able to fit in potentially fit some planters and some landscaping of that nature. So.
Councillor Armstrong, Brown, and Turley in order.
Thank you. Again, obviously, we're getting lots of complaints about this, and there's some that are for. I'm getting far more anti than for. The other thing is when you're doing your consultation, obviously it's going to be with Pacifica. Service Canada has got a lot of concerns, so does Fisheries. So I'm hoping those people will be spoken with, as well as BC Ambulance, Fire, and RCMP, because that is a main road utilized quite a bit. And just going back to my days, I found that a very busy road, and would like to see it actually be 4 lanes all the way through. So I would really like to ensure that all emergency services are consulted with this when it moves forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
To build on that, I really do need to sort of emphasize what you guys are seeing right now is conceptual. We are still working through with the consultant all of the details, and we are going to be managing that with different stakeholders, whether it's emergency services, whether it's specific property owners, to ensure that we manage everybody's needs and don't create any unnecessary hiccups.
Just as a follow-up on that, from a Service Canada perspective, because that's a main building for a lot of people, and they don't want to see the loss of the parking and moving down, as well as the accessibility issue as well. You are going to have the big trucks that are going in there as well. You get the armored guards going in there as well. So where are they going to park? Is that going to be taken into account to make sure that the width is there? So those are just concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Great project. Thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you to the staff that worked on this. I think it's excellent, and I'm looking forward to watch it advance through the detailed design and sort of overcome some of the challenges and concerns I think people have. Because I think they are legitimate, but I'm fully aware these are conceptual plans, and until the detailed design is done, it's not as we see it. And so I think that have full confidence that you'll do the engagement and the consultation to address some of those concerns and maybe provide solutions where there currently is none. My just one question is, in terms of transit stops, I think there's a few of them along there. Just wondering how they would be accommodated.
So, we didn't include it. So basically what we'll do is have transit stop in the lane, and then we will introduce a treatment across the cycle track. It's fairly common practice. Go anywhere that you see cycle tracks, they exist. Basically, it's a crosswalk across the cycle track for people to come across and get on or off the buses. So,
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, Mr. Rose. So the challenge that I have with the concept, and I understand it's a concept, is the side of the street, of Front Street, east versus west, where the bicycle lanes are going to go. And given the fact that, as Councillor Brown said, the transit, basically, my understanding is there's only northbound transit on Front Street, there's no southbound. And then also on the west side, there's, and I counted them tonight, there's 17 parking spots plus one loading zone between the high-rise and Bastion Street. The biggest concern is deliveries. So if you look at the buildings that are along Front Street, the one that's going to be most impacted is Pacifica, the high-rise on 38 Front Street. So I guess I'm hoping that you'll, and I'm sure you will, pardon me, look into the feasibility of having the bike lanes on the west side of Front Street as opposed to the east side, which would take away the issue of the transit buses blocking traffic, plus the concerns over delivery capability to 38 Front Street.
Through your worship, like I said, we're going to work through all of these details with all of the stakeholders to make sure that we meet these concerns or address these concerns.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I think this is a great plan as well. And I look forward to the I look forward to the designs that the staff is going to come up with this. I think it would definitely open up and bring more people into that area by having this street diet as we're looking at here. I sent an email earlier today regarding our responsibility on providing on-street parking, and I was wondering if anybody had an opportunity to come up with an answer to that. Specifically in my email for the public, I asked about our obligations to provide parking for a specific business or residence, and are we obligated to do that, and in terms of delivery trucks and that sort of thing. So I was wondering if you could provide, if we have any answers to that.
Your Worship, in the spirit of Mr. Schulberg's answer, the short answer is no. I can expand. There is no obligation on the part of the city to provide specific parking in front of your home or your business or your building. Having said that, we definitely, as Councillor Brown intimated, we understand the concerns of the Pacifica. They're very constrained as far as their ability to deliver. There's potential treatments, but I think we go down this road of accommodating this building at the expense of the public benefit. So I think we're looking at what is the best use of the road right-of-way, and it's not necessarily for a single property owner or a single business or a single building to benefit from. Not necessarily. There may be exceptions, and I'm not trying to draw a hard line around this. But in the case of Pacifica, as an example, or even the federal building, there's limitations to how they do their business or how they take deliveries, et cetera, and I'm not sure that we can accommodate everybody's special conditions all the time. So that's just a general comment. I don't want to put a box at it. As Mr. Rose said, we're early days on this, and we want to consider everybody's needs, concerns, and try to accommodate as best we can without going down the road of tying ourselves in knots and not doing anything because we can't get it perfect. I'm sorry.
Thank you, and I'm thankful for that, and that I completely understand. We've been getting a number of emails from folks at Pacifica, and I completely understand their situation they're in. I haven't received any complaints by email from Service Canada or Fisheries, but I know that Pacifica has some definite concerns about that area. Thanks.
So just briefly to add, not to belabor this, but Mr. Rose has already spoken to a number of residents himself, and we're going to funnel things through a single point of contact on the project, especially with that particular building through the project manager, so that everything will be funneled through, and then the information will be disseminated from there.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Rose. I'm excited about this project. I'm curious about the process, and I'm guessing if I don't know, the broader community doesn't know. So you've brought kind of loose design ideas to us, and you've said you can complete this for about $400,000. Then you go back to the community, you consult with businesses, you consult with residents, and then you bring that back to us. You consult with transit with a plan that brings into account everything you've heard, and then we are given final approval to go ahead. Is that correct? And if that is correct, what's the timeline?
Through your worship, I was, to be honest, expecting that we would be going through, with the compressed timeline, we would be going through the detailed design with our consultant and engaging stakeholders and continuing through with a project that had that resolves the issues, and we would take that through and expect to deliver it in the spring of 2020.
Okay.
So.
And a further question, if I may, it's connected to this, not directly, but we keep talking about creating networks and loops that people can stay on and complete a whole lap of wherever they need to go. Now, just beyond this is that really tricky intersection of Comox and Highway 19 and Wallace. And I'm curious, what I heard at Mr. Rosen's presentation is that because that's a really difficult intersection to navigate, it's going to be costly to put in the infrastructure to make it safe. So given that we have these projects that are contributing in many ways to kind of this fractured cycling network or pedestrian infrastructure network, is there an opportunity for the city to not put in infrastructure in projects where they're just going to be pieces and save it and do difficult intersections like the one that would complete this loop?
Through your worship, we can approach it that way. I would say that you'll still end up with a fragmented system if you go that way. You may address some pressure points, but at the end of the day, you've got a piece and a piece and a piece. With this particular one, we are envisioning continuing through with our design to create the entire loop as we roll out over the next few years with the rest of the projects. So this just happened to be the relatively quick, relatively easy one to get on the ground. So once we get to that point, we do have scenarios where we have to look at crossing people over the Millstone, whether they go to Lions Grate, whether they go to the Pearson Bridge, or do they continue north or west across up Comox or on to the Wallace to continue around in a loop, or do they go north to the ENN? So I think with respect to this one, we're going to keep working through and we're going to create the loop here. And so that's part of our the overall downtown project. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to thank staff for the responsiveness and for this this vision of road diet and cycling infrastructure on Front Street. You can see somebody getting off the float plane and walking into our downtown, and immediately this looks like a modern city where there's cyclists, there's pedestrians, there's vehicles. It's easy to connect, and I really appreciate the vision. I know that there is some design considerations, and as we put more cycle lanes in the city, these design issues with buildings and different needs are going to come up, and we're going to become Jedi Knights being able to solve them. And it's just a matter of going through it and getting people used to it. So I commend you bringing this forward, and I look forward to the process of putting it through. And this is a nice, quick win for the city. So thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I just want to seek some clarification on the parking, because for the Uplands project, one of the reasons I voted for it was because there would be 16 on-street parking spots. Yet I just heard that we don't have any obligation to do that. So for me, I never would have voted for that project if that was what Mr. Sim says is accurate. So I really need some clarification around that when we're dealing with those projects, because it was, I can't remember, 50 underground and then a dedicated 16 on Uplands for that building. So I'm very concerned about, I'm getting mixed messaging, and I don't like that. Thank you. If I could get some clarification.
Your Worship, maybe I can jump in and try to respond to Councillor Armstrong's questions, but in general, I think what the Councillor is referring to is if we have a project that's coming forward and seeking variances to on-site parking requirements,
from time to time, we'll look at surrounding infrastructure and say, well, there is an availability of on-street parking in that specific location, and maybe it's one of the things we'll point to look at a rationale for reduction in on-site parking. In the case of Uplands, I recall that there was previously, prior to that development, there was no on-street parking along Uplands, if you recall. So that project, they did the works and services required to build the ultimate standard for that road, which did introduce on-street parking. That on-street parking, of course, is public. It's available for anyone to park in, but we did use it as a rationale for reducing some parking requirements on that site, if I recall. At the end of the day, it's public parking in our road right-of-way, and whether this council or a future council decided to repurpose that parking for another use, that would be the determination that we've made at that time. There's no requirement, there's nothing binding those parking stalls to that property at all.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, to Mr. Rose. I totally appreciate that this is early days and it's a concept and it's a design to start with, and I appreciate that. And the intent is to increase mobility and active transportation in our downtown core, and I support that. But one thing that I haven't heard referenced, I don't think, this afternoon is, and I'm very curious about it, I hope that in your studies and your research, you will be able to provide some documentation regarding the impact, potential impact, on flow of vehicular traffic. Because when I look at this nice picture, I see 1, 2 cars and maybe a city truck there. They're busy doing the landscaping, I believe. But seriously, I would be interested in the numbers of vehicles that use that street, both directions, and how this potential design could impact that. Because I know we want to get more people involved in active transportation, but I also know that we don't want to slow down the flow of vehicular traffic through our city. It's very important to keep things moving. So when I hear, if I'm understanding correctly, that the bus stops will be in fact stopping vehicle traffic behind them, that's a concern to me. So I only mention this because I don't think others did, and I would be interested in numbers of vehicles using that street. Thank you.
Through your worship, that has been part of our study and investigation. So we have had our consultant look at that and give us some assurance that we're not about to create an entire network of gridlock at the cost of cycle lanes. So, and right now there is adequate capacity to absorb all of the space for cycle tracks and not compromise the mobility of vehicles.
Well, that's great. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And this may be a philosophical thing, is we actually do want to slow down the traffic in our downtown core. Specifically, even for the people in Pacifica, so when they're walking across the street, they're not getting hit by cars going 50, 60 kilometers an hour, which is easily done on that street in the 2 lanes that it's into now. So we don't want cars to be gridlocked, but we don't want them going fast either. So thank you. I just...
No need to respond to that, Mr. That's not your job. This is their job. Any further questions?
Any further questions?
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. There is a recommended motion. I think it is fairly clear from the questions and the responses tonight that everyone is concerned about the design on Front Street, and I think it's very clear that staff is equally conscious of the considerations of council, that this will be coming back to us at some point for our approval. This is not a decision to which staff has to be responsible for ultimately, as are all decisions, I suppose, arguably, but this one in particular. Any comments from Ms. Gurry, Mr. Rudolph? Something I might have missed before we discuss a motion? Mr. Rudolph?
Your Worship, just for clarity, you're seeking, you would approve it, but you would have the sort of a clause that you would like to, you're approving the funding subject to confirmation of the results of the public engagement and the final design concepts coming forward for your information or your approval.
I am looking at the motions that are recommended, and I think, subject to what Ms. Gurry says, that...
Yes, Your Worship, I believe, just to interject, yes, you're looking to move and second, and hopefully it pass the motions as presented, with the understanding that the, I can't even ever remember the word, not conceptual design, but the final design will come back to you for additional approval at that time, as with any project of this nature.
Do I have someone to make the recommended motions? Councillor Bonner.
Second.
Councillor Armstrong, are you seconding or waiting to speak to it?
I'm waiting to speak. I have a question before I vote.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes. Yes. Second.
Councillor Hemmons, sorry. It's my ears. Councillor Bonner, do you wish to speak to it first? And then Councillor Armstrong.
So through you to Ms. Mercer, so this will be a 0.6% tax increase then to fund this?
Through your worship to Councillor Armstrong, to fund the items in this.
Yes.
It would be, the recommendation is to fund them from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve, and there would be no tax increase to fund the 220, and the 400 for the downtown cycling loop is already included in the Community Works Fund.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. With respect to the cycle track, I'm cognizant of messaging around laying the tracks and driving the trains, so I wouldn't be expecting to approve the staff detailed design. I think that's getting far too into the weeds. But with respect to the project overall, I'm absolutely supportive. I just do have a couple concerns about expenditures with the lasers on the Port Theatre. I'm just not convinced that's something worth spending money on. And I might be alone in that, but if it emerges, then we can address it. And then just another item I think would be very interesting as we refresh crosswalks is to, we have the Pride crosswalk, but also to look at painting a transgendered flag crosswalk. I just put that out there for now as we look at the sidewalk refresh program over the longer term. So supportive of this. Oh, and one other thing, sorry, just missed my note there, is I think the Nanaimo sign, 3D sign, is interesting, but I actually think such a sign represents a far more interesting opportunity with respect to language revitalization and possibly using hokuminum in the signage. I just think that language revitalization is such an important part of culture, and in particular in the age of reconciliation. I think it could be a neat opportunity and a neat twist on something that's been done elsewhere.
Point noted, Councillor Brown. I think it's fair to say, subject to POG is also arrangements around renaming or naming both, providing both names for various sites in the city. So I think we're on top of that one already. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just building on Councillor Brown's comments, I definitely think lasers are cool. However, potentially unnecessary in the Diana Crawl area unless it is a system that can be moved around for other functions. But also too wanted to say that I just wanted some clarity. Are we expecting to get a design back for further approval? Because I personally don't feel that it's necessary. I think staff we'll do the design consultation and connection with the community on the road diet and cycle track, and I just want some clarity on that.
Well, Your Worship, our normal process would not be to necessarily come back to council for approval of a specific design. However, in this case, I was seeking clarification myself what your expectations are. In this case, it's just bring it back so you have a final idea of where it all landed in terms of the process, or were you seeking some further opportunity to vet that process? So it could be either or, but our standard process would be just to authorize funding, and we'll keep you informed and let you know the outcome of that, and we'll proceed unless otherwise directed by council.
Thank you. Yeah, personally, I'm definitely do not need to be to have that design come back for final approval. And yeah, I'm just very excited about these quick wins. Thank you for the staff for being responsive on getting this back to us. And I'm really excited about the Front Street cycle track. It's just looking more and more modern every day. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a couple of questions. Number one, this motion, is it for both items in the same motion, or are we doing different motions for each one?
It's the motion as in the agenda.
Yeah, I see that. I have a problem with that one. So, because I don't believe, unlike Councillor Gesselbeck, I think given the concerns over the various traffic flows involved on Front Street, I think having that as a separate motion to advise staff to go ahead to investigate further, as opposed to, no, we don't need, we let staff decide and it's a done deal. I think we're going to get slammed from residents in the area on that one. So if it is one motion, then unfortunately I'm in a bit of a hoop situation because I'll have to vote against the motion, period. So.
I think the intent was that they would be separate motions. That's how we had introduced it originally, so we split this out. So I would suggest you have the option to split this into separate motions if you so choose, because there could be a difference of opinion on the second one, perhaps even on the first one.
Ms. Scurry?
Thank you, Worship. So yes, you can vote on them, seriatim. You could agree to do A and then separately do B. Or 1 and 2, however it is in your actual agenda. The PowerPoint slide says A and B. So.
Councillor Bonner, do you have a problem with that?
Not at all.
And the seconder? Excellent. Councillor Armstrong, anything further you wish to say?
No.
All right, so we're going to, unless I hear from anyone else, we're going to vote on the first motion, which is to allocate $220,000 from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund, etc. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to echo some of the other comments. I'm not particularly chuffed with lasers on the back of the Port Theatre either. And my question is, if we vote for this $200,000, we're voting for $10,000 with the lasers. Could we not just move that over into the mural program, which are a lot less electronic?
Lindsay.
Your Worship, the purpose of this list was simply to generate that discussion amongst council. And again, I don't want to call it a shopping list, but it's intended to give council a number of different options in the downtown. If there's one project that you would not like to proceed or maybe withhold or defer at this time until we do some further work, that's absolutely at council's discretion. If the preference is to allocate more or additional funds to one project beyond what staff has identified, that's also an option. I'm just sure the finance department would appreciate knowing where that funding is coming from.
My suggestion would be that we not fund the lasers and we put the $10,000 into the mural program and all of it to come out of the same source of funding as coming now.
Are you moving an amendment?
Of my own motion? Sure.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Councillor Thorpe and Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the amendment, I can't support it as it stands. I don't mind doing away with the lasers with respect to Councillor Gesselbrock, but I'm not in a hurry to reallocate that money to the mural project. I think it could be well diverted elsewhere, so I would like to look at other options. As we mentioned earlier, for example, end-of-life seasonal decorations for downtown. So I think there's other things we could look at if we were looking for a way to spend that money from the lasers. Thank you.
Let me make a suggestion. It is 6:30. We are going to be going into a full council meeting at 7 o'clock. We don't have to decide on the spending of the money tonight in terms of the $220,000 minus the laser. So can we perhaps agree on a motion not to fund the laser aspect of this and leave a decision about whether or not we wish to reallocate that money to some other project to a future date? Would that satisfy everyone? Am I getting general agreement? Is that amendment to the amendment, so to speak, approved and agreed to and accepted?
Yes.
Yes.
So the amendment is simply to withdraw the laser project from the $220,000 motion, correct? Ms. Gurry, you're okay with that? Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We're now back on the main motion, which is the $220,000 less the laser project. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I would now like someone to move the second motion. Ms. Gurry?
You don't need to remove it, you can just, you're voting on them, Sari Adams, so
Sari
it's
Adams. Yes, thank you.
moved and seconded.
And that is to accelerate the Front Street bi-directional cycle track portion of the downtown cycling loop project from 2021 to 2020. And notwithstanding the concerns expressed by various members of council, we should be wearing this one, and it should be coming back to us. But Councillor Bonner, do you wish to say something? I have you still on the list.
At all anymore. I think this is rather important, like this bike lane, and how we handle it is also important, because as we've seen in many cities, this is a fairly controversial subject, putting bike lanes in. And I'd like to make sure that we do it right on the first one. So I would like to see some public engagement, I agree with the other councillors in terms of the final design, but I think this is something that we need to engage more with the public. I think it's a fabulous project. I just think we need to reach out more.
Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to say anything further on this?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Bonner. Because this is just a recommendation, I'll vote for it, and then I'll wait until it comes to council. But my concerns are, again, what we're hearing from the business people, what we're hearing from the community in the area. We all said we would listen to community, and so I think it's really important that we hear back from them. And so, for that reason, I'll support this till from the finance to go to council, but then I'll have to reassess at council.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I would just like clarification then. Are we getting another chance to look at final design as a council and approve it or not? Or are we just leaving it to staff? Because I'm getting both messages at the moment.
My understanding, Ms. Gurry, is that we will have this back before council for final approval as to the design. That we are going to wear this either in shame or glory or something in between, but it will be council's issue. Mr. Sims, you wish to say something?
Your Worship, thank you. Yeah, we can commit to coming back and giving you the results of our public engagement and showing you the concepts or the final design. Council can, as Mr. Lindsay's hinted, can kibosh this at any time. This is your decision to make in the final analysis. This might be a little unusual in detailed design, but at the same time we recognize, as Councillor Bonner's suggested, that there's a sensitive nature here, and we understand that. So we'd like to bring it back to you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? I think we're all fairly clear. We are going to review this once more before it is approved finally, so that will be council's decision ultimately. Ms. Gurry, we're fine with that. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I'd now appreciate that we have no other business. I assume that we have no questions in the question period sheet. A motion for adjournment would be appropriate. Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much, everyone. A very good afternoon.